All right, we are live. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. We very much appreciate you being with us. This is the first in our fall series of Fireside Chats that we're going to be doing here at ContentLab. We at ContentLab are a technical marketing company. We specialize in tech content generation for developers and engineers, and the gamut of people running software. We've been doing this for years. It's all we do, and I know it's a real interesting time for content marketing right now. And there's a lot of questions. A lot of people have a lot of things they'd like to hear about, and so we thought it'd be a good time to kind of pop in and talk a little about what's going on right now. So my name is Peter White. I'm a content strategist at ContentLab. I've been here for a few years now, but before that, I was a full stack developer. I've spent 12 or 13 years in that role and before getting into content. And I'm joined today by Roger Winter, who will tell you a little bit of himself.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Roger Winter. I'm also a content strategist at ContentLab. Been working ContentLab full-time about 2 years. Prior to that, I was a web developer for nearly a decade and was also involved in content production as a freelance writer and content strategist for a while. So been around the content space and the development space for quite some time now. And yeah, been doing some interesting things with ContentLab over the last 2 years.
Yeah, Roger's seen it all. Perfect. So he's the perfect person to be here with us. And so today we're going to look at something that everyone in content marketing is talking about right now, which obviously is AI. Obviously, it's been a pretty significant development for content generation. And while it's still kind of new, kind of we're at the point now where I think we got a little bit of an understanding about it. We've all been using it quite steadily for the last little bit and with mixed results. So we'd love to talk about today. So specifically today, we're going to talk about the top AI questions that every content marketer needs answered. So we put together kind of a list of what we think are the most important questions, but we'll also be doing a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions that aren't covered in this talk, feel free to pop them in the chat and we will address those at the end. So to kick it off, we're going to start with what I think is probably the question that most people are curious about and most people spend, I guess, most of the time thinking about. And that is, how will the role of content marketers change if AI takes over a significant portion of content generation? Like, are we all going to be out of jobs, or what's going on here? So Roger, let me hear what you think about this.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question, and I think it's something everyone in the content space is dealing with in one way or another. I feel like certainly in my work, and I think across the entire industry, we've kind of reaching a point where we're realizing, I think there was a bit of an initial disruption there, just this kind of fear of like, is this actually capable of completely replacing the work of content marketers or content creators? And there was a moment there where that was like an open question hanging in the air, but I think it's pretty clear now that we're not at that point yet. Like, we have a long way to go. However, like, that's not to say that like these tools aren't important for content creation, but they're not like a complete replacement or a panacea. There's a quote from a Harvard Business School professor, something like, AI won't replace humans, but humans who use AI will replace humans who don't. And I thought that was pretty on point. The people who are using it effectively and know how to get good results from it are going to kind of force the hand of people who don't. And in that sense, you might see more of a concentration of workload into like expertise. Like, so, like one really good writer might now be able to do the work that 3 writers could previously do, but you still need that one really good writer. So it's not removing humans from the equation, but it's giving them sort of a level up in terms of their capability to scale out what they can do.
Yeah, that's fair. I think all of us probably have tried to just give AI a title and say write an article, and I would assume everyone I've talked to anyway, the experience has been bad. I mean, maybe there's some like really kind of low level topics that you can tell it to write, but like even then, it's we discussed this before. I mean, the AI it has a voice that it writes in that is kind of recognizable and is kind of not great. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
right.
like, I don't know.
It definitely has. I mean, you can ask it to write in different styles, but if you just let it go off on its own, it has a very distinctive voice, and that voice is kind of stuffy and overly verbose and like academic and not very relatable.
No, it's like if you got a friend who, and I'm not saying that just because you used the word panacea earlier, but if you got a friend who uses a lot of big words without not necessarily know what they mean, AI just kind of throws them in there, and it doesn't sound like anything that a human would really write during. But I do think there are areas where it is useful. Like you said, it's a bit of a tool and it can help you do this faster. So it's not like it can take over a job, but it can definitely help you do a job. The analogy I use anyway is a lot like when Excel came around. Like Excel didn't take over accounting, but it certainly made an accountant get a lot more done in a day. I think anyway. I don't really know an accountant, but I'm assuming that it seems like it would have.
Yeah.
It's at the moment, I think I don't know. The other thing I like to compare it to is self-driving cars. Like it really seemed like everybody was going to be in a self-driving car by now, but they just keep crashing and running people over and things. It's not quite there. I mean, it's close, but the last bit is a big bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that sense, if you just look at it as a kind of a normal progression of, technology, in the sense that, we've been trying to automate things since, like the textile industry in the 1800s or something, or like you could find examples that go further back. But, and then like for a long time, we've just been programming computers, and now you can kind of program them with natural language. And that's sort of all of these things really are. So in that regard, like very much like you said, Excel didn't replace accountants or all these different positions, but I'm sure there was a moment in time in that industry where they were having a very similar conversation around what we're having right now about Excel and spreadsheets and what we would consider very basic computational capabilities today.
For sure. I guarantee there was a boardroom where somebody went, why can't we just fire all the accountants and have Steve from marketing do payroll now because we got Excel? So yeah, we're certainly not there where it's going to be replacing anybody. I mean, obviously, none of us can say what's going to happen in the future, but it's hard to imagine that it gets that good that quick that it's going to take everybody's jobs. As you mentioned, it might take people who aren't necessarily very good at content marketing, it might take their jobs, but you're going to need somebody who knows how to write and knows what's supposed to go in there in order to babysit this thing to get something decent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's pretty much a perfect summary of it. And I would just encourage anyone in the space to incorporate AI tools into their work sooner rather than later, and just figure out how you can make the most of it. Treat it less as like a threat and more of a potential, ally, something that's on your side.
Yeah, you don't want to be the guy who doesn't have the supercharged AI working for it.
Exactly. Very cool. Yeah, I think that kind of leads us pretty naturally into our next question, which is just kind of taking another view of this. So what do you think about just like sort of the outputs from these AIs, especially in terms of like, do you think AI generated content can match the quality and authenticity of human generated content?
I mean, whatever. Short answer is no, but the long answer I think is a little more complicated because I do think in short spurts, if it's really well babysit, that you can get kind of reasonable results from it. But it's almost like it almost takes as much time as it does to actually write the thing to get a high quality result from it. Like you really have to tell it exactly what you want. Like this is the example I give all the time. We talked about this the other day, but I've never told AI to write something for me, even if it's just a couple of paragraphs. I've never had it go off and like it'll never write like a really clever analogy or a really like kind of nice turn of phrase or something that really shows that you understand what you're talking about. You know what I mean? There's always like if you talk to someone who's worked on something for 20 years, they just have a way of talking about it that is really kind of succinct and to the point. It's that old Einstein thing: if you don't really understand something, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old. And I feel like AI doesn't do a very good job of that. I feel like it really, like you said, it's very verbose. It's kind of, it's not, it's not fun to read. I've never read an AI article and been like, oh yeah, that's bang on. That's exactly how it should be, and that really wrote it out well. So in my experience, it hasn't like, in order to get something that's even close to the quality of a person who's a good writer, you really have to essentially write the thing through prompts. Like you have to sit there and massage everything to get there. I don't know what your experience has been like.
Yeah, I mean, I totally resonate with that. Maybe you've had a similar experience where you're sitting there like coming up with different prompts and getting it to write something, and then at the end you're like, well, that was a waste of time, and you just write it yourself and realize like, hey, like I'm a writer to begin with. I don't really need this thing, but then you like your mind kind of gets into a different space of this challenge of trying to get the right output from the thing, and you can kind of, I mean, that's an interesting exercise on its own. But if your goal is just to get to the content straight away, sometimes you can just kind of spin your wheels doing that. Because yeah, like you said, I think AI is really good on like maybe the structural part of writing or the things that are the sort of non-human elements, the like just like raw, like just like dumping information on you, or like formatting it, or like putting things into some kind of structure. It's very good at that, but it fails in just the sort of communication or like emotional connection aspect, which is an interesting thing that I don't know, especially we do like lots of technical content and stuff, and you might not think like the emotional aspect or something is important, but that kind of resonance is really important regardless of what you're talking about. Um, uh, Not to say that like, you know, your documentation needs to be like poetic or something like that, but you know, it's there's a certain way to convey things that humans understand, and the AI is just trying to emulate that, so it doesn't ultimately know.
Yeah, it's like when you watch a documentary on Netflix. Like there can be a really good documentary about a really boring subject, or there can be a really boring documentary about a really interesting subject. Like you can write an article that has all the information in it, but it could be unreadable. Like it just be a muddy thing where you I don't know if you've ever had those where you start reading an article and you zone out. You don't even think you're zoning out, but you're just suddenly not taking in the words anymore because they're not written properly. It doesn't really connect, and I find that's the thing with AI. Like it just doesn't all the information is there, but it's not put in a way that makes me want to take it in or makes it easy to take in. It really makes you have to work for it. It's kind of
Yeah,
like
I
I use this analogy the other day. I'm sorry, I'm just full of analogies and showing off because I know AI can't do it. But it's like when you watch something that has a voiceover, but it's that computer voiceover where it's like 80% like a human, but there's just little inflections and things that are off, and I find it
yeah
hard to
you
listen to. Like I find it grates on me.
Right, like the text to speech
Hmm.
things. Absolutely, yeah. I know exactly where, especially now they have these models that are trained in people's real voices. So it's not just like the computer voice, but you get like Louis Theroux or something, and it's like the cadence isn't quite right. It's like 90% there, but you have this kind of uncanny valley thing going on of like, wait a minute, I know that's not what that person sounds like. Uh, and yeah, I that's totally, ChatGPT is kind of the text equivalent of that.
Bang on, that's bang on. Yeah, yeah. If you don't babysit it at every single sentence, really, honestly, at the sentence level, if you're not really tuning everything, then it's gonna sound a little bit off. And maybe maybe that'll get better. I can't obviously say that that's not gonna get better, but at the moment, it's just not. It's not even like it's close, but not close at the same time.
Right. And I find, maybe you found similarly, but I mean, if you give it a lot of context or a lot of examples, it does get a lot better at that. But that kind of goes back to the earlier point of how much time you want to put into it before you just write the thing yourself. Um,
For sure.
and that's a balance to consider.
And I mean, even with that, I mean, the best case scenario you're hoping for is as good as what was written before. Like when you give it examples, you know what I mean? Like it's not going to take an example and go and
Right.
make it better. It's going to make it 90% as good. So every time you copy an article, it's going to get worse and worse, which I think this is a little bit off topic, but I think, there is a real chance of that happening with the flood of AI content, and then it's going to be trained on AI content that it might actually get worse over time as opposed to better.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting because it's just working off of old, like recycled information. You kind of have the super compressed JPEG problem of the thing that's been re-uploaded to Facebook 1,000 times. But now it's just like processed through 100 different LLMs and posted on somebody's blog. Um, yeah, that could be a very real problem.
Yeah, it'll have the facts, but it'll just be more and more like a game of broken telephone where some of the words are right, but all of a sudden it's saying something completely different.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's definitely a real concern. Hopefully, the AI does not make us stupider, but it is possible.
that kind of leads us to our next question, which is kind of related to, as it's moving forward, what's going to happen. Because I know this might be, I think, in my opinion, one of the downfalls of AI, but I think it's really important in tech marketing, especially, is to think about how adaptable is AI in kind of understanding and responding to changing market trends. Because tech moves super quickly, and what's popular moves super quickly. And is AI, I mean, ever going to be able to keep up with that?
Uh, it's a really interesting question. I mean, in theory, your AI can be pretty much as current as whatever you're feeding into it. But that kind of goes back to just what we were just talking about: is how much time do you want to spend teaching this thing before it can give you output. So like there's situations where that is super valuable, like maybe you have an internal knowledge base or something, like a bunch of information that's not going to change a lot, or something proprietary, and you need to teach the model about it, and then it can write a whole bunch of stuff for you. Like that's a very advantageous situation. But in the case of just like we have current we have like some current event happening or some new technology and we need to write about it, that's where I think AI is always going to fall short, because it's always looking at the past. I mean, you could stream data to it in real time, but that data still has to be collected and processed and then sent into the thing. And so like, it's always looking at the past, no matter what. So, and I mean, you could say that is true of all content creation efforts and on some level, but the AI adds an extra step of like this latency of having to train this thing and get it to do all of this, as opposed to just writing it. So
yeah. Sorry, not to cut you off. I'm excited because I
No, go
really like
ahead,
that point.
please.
I think that's even just beyond getting it the information and feeding into it. I think that one of the big drawbacks of AI with kind of current cutting edge things and things that are just coming out is that the AI can't experience and react to something new. Like the only way it can tell you about something new is by kind of parroting what other people have said or what similar things have been like in the past. It can't actually log on to a new platform and use it and then tell you what's good and what's bad about it. It can only infer that from what it already knows. So like when something comes out, if you really want a good reaction to it, you need a human being to experience it and be able to pass that experience on to really get an authentic feel for what it is. I think at best with AI, you're getting, like you said, a kind of a copy of a copy of a copy of what this thing is like. So I feel like with new technologies, it's going to be even less accurate than it is with things that have been around for a long time and people have written about a lot.
Yeah. Another interesting thought that I had while you were saying that is, I mean, these models are learning from the past and from existing content. So if you want, for example, like if you want your product or your service or whatever to be represented in the output from an LLM, you need to actually create that content in the first place to have it trained on it, so that a year from now, when I go and I ask ChatGPT like about your business, it knows what it is. So like, there's kind of an interesting thing there where, like it's kind of slow to respond, but part of what we're doing as content creators is also training these AI now so that they are aware of what we're talking about in the same way that we make the public aware of it.
Yeah, that's fair. That is a very good point. So yeah, I think again, what this kind of leads back to what we were talking about before. Like in order to get something good out of AI for kind of new trends or new technologies, you again need an operator to be babysitting. You just need somebody who has experienced it to at least tell it what it has experienced, and it can write it out in a way that's nice. But you need some actual human being to have that experience before you can really get something new. So I mean, I guess that's kind of it, with the AI. Like if you really want something that's unique and something that's insightful with a new insight, it's really hard to get that with AI. You really need a human being especially for new and changing things. I mean, that's just not unfortunately. I guess it's fortunate for us because it's our job, but obviously we'd all like it to work a little better. I think I don't know. This is again a little bit off topic, but I found something with it, especially with new and changing things, is it's making me a little bit lazy with it. Do you know what I mean? Like I'll have my new experience and I'll have the thing, and then like you said, I will spend as much time as it would take to actually write the thing, getting ChatGPT to write it the way that I want it to write it, as opposed to just doing it yourself. I'm worried it's going to be a little bit. I'm worried I'm going to lose my ability to write as well as I used to be able to.
Yeah, you lose some of your edge there. No, I mean,
Yeah,
I think that's a real thing. You're sort of trading your writing skills for prompt engineering skills, or at least the practice of it. Hopefully it doesn't atrophy too quickly, but
yeah.
yeah,
I'm worried word prompt engineering is not going to be quite as satisfying as writing something good. It's going
this is
to
true. Yeah, it's not. But I mean, I think that's a great way to sort of cap that off. Like ultimately, like if you already know what you want it to say, you can give it the information. But if you're trying to get something out of it, especially if it's about a current event or something, like you really don't want to rely on the AI as any kind of source of truth. You could run into more problems than just being out of date if you're just relying on whatever it gives you as output.
That's a very good point. I don't want to get off that too quick, but like it is. We haven't once mentioned how unreliable it can be sometimes, especially talking about new things. Like if you try to make it talk about something that just came out and it doesn't know, it's more likely to be off.
Yeah, that's totally. It's especially like, I mean, so I've kind of given the context of this around like some of the possibilities of training AI and models and stuff like that. But if we were to just bring this back into the context of, I'm just going to open up ChatGPT and ask it a question, in that context, like the answer to this question is 100% no, or like it's terrible at responding to trends because it's literally looking at data from 2021. So, I mean, that's just an important caveat to all of this is like, you can train these things to do like almost whatever you want. But if we're just talking about just using the off the shelf models, you definitely don't want to rely on those for any kind of up to the minute information.
Yeah, it's out of date. That thing doesn't even know that Will Smith slapped Chris Rock a couple years ago. You can't trust it for anything.
Yeah, with that, let's my next question for you, Peter. It kind of ties into all of this for sure. But in your opinion, how cost effective is using AI for content marketing versus hiring human content creators?
Well, I mean, I think that really depends on how much you care about the quality. Like if you don't care about quality, then it's way cheaper to just have AI pump out bad content. But it's not, I mean, it's just not going to work. I mean, it's not, you can fill a website with stuff that's not great and maybe get some SEO out of it. People don't stick around if they can't understand what they're reading and they don't get anything out of it. So I think really, if you're going to, leverage AI to try to save costs, you're going to end up spending more on the back end, cleaning up articles and making them better, or, loss of ROI. I don't think currently that it's like, I think you need a balance at the moment, basically. I think if you want to really scale up content, you still need people. So I think it is kind of a mix. Unfortunately, I don't have a degree in business, so I don't know enough about money to know how this works, but it seems like at the moment, it's certainly not an all-in strategy. I think you need to find a balance and find a way that makes fiscal sense for you to combine AI with people who really do know how to write in order to have any success.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that kind of ties into what we were just talking about in a couple ways. But your point of how it just sort of moves, like it can just kind of pass the cost downstream a little bit. Like instead of spending a bunch of money on an author to write this, you can have AI write it, but then you're going to spend extra money fact checking it and editing it and running it by experts who actually know what's going on. So I think there's like sort of a hidden cost in there. I think when people look at this, just like doing back of the napkin math, you're just like, oh, I'll just cross out the whatever I pay my writers. And but I mean, it might work like that in some capacity, but not really. Kind of like my point earlier, and as you said, scaling is like a really big part of this. Is like now maybe one writer could do the work of two or three potentially, like not in every case, but like that's kind of the way that I would look at it, is more of scaling up the capabilities of a few individuals rather than replacing people, and that reflects in the cost, obviously, in all sorts of ways. But like you were touching on with our last question as well, just about the verifying technical accuracy and stuff, I think that's like the biggest thing in terms of this cost question of like, okay, now we have all this stuff coming out of AI and LLMs, but who's going to read it and make sure it's accurate and truthful?
Yeah, I guess that's similar to all the development shops who figure they can just replace developers with AI as well. Like, okay, but now you need a team of testers that's beyond anything you've ever had before to be able to really get this thing to work. It doesn't just come off the shelf working. I mean, we all know if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. You can't just replace everybody with AI at the moment, unfortunately, for CEOs, fortunately for us.
And I mean, I think if you didn't have the right infrastructure in place, you could end up in a really bad situation where if you're just publishing a bunch of stuff and not vetting it properly and, going through all of these steps, if you're just like, hey, I have all of this content now, and you just want to blast that out into the world, you could be misleading people, publishing things that are just wrong, or there's all sorts of pitfalls there.
For sure. I mean, and that's especially big in tech marketing. I mean, if you put out a guide that doesn't work, people will hate your company right out of the gate and never come back. I mean, it's just, you have to be accurate. Accuracy is so important that you can't really trust it to AI at the moment. So, I mean, I guess, the main takeaway is that it could help you save some money. Like you said, you could scale down and use less people who are really good and use AI as a tool. So, there are ways to kind of cut some costs here, but it's not an all-in strategy where you can just take your entire writer's budget and flush it down the toilet for $20 a month for ChatGPT.
Agreed.
And speaking of kind of cutting your entire writing staff, this is kind of, we saved this question for the last because I think this is maybe the most complex question around AI, and it doesn't factor in as much to day to day. But I really think it is interesting to talk about, and I'm curious what other people think about it, yourself included, Roger, because we haven't talked about this. But what do you think the ethical considerations are around using AI for content marketing? Is this okay? Is this a problem? What are we doing here?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of questions there, most of which are well above our pay grade or mental capacity to decide probably. But so I don't know. I think like broadly, there's two streams to consider here. There's the sort of model training aspect of, is it ethical to like grab all of the content on the internet and train your AI using that, or is that like plagiarism? Or but that's on the side of like that's for like the AI companies to worry about. And then as content creators, I think the questions are more like, are we using AI responsibly? Are we being transparent about how we're using it and why we're using it? And are we taking steps to make sure that, like we said before, things are factually accurate, that we're not plagiarizing anything intentionally or unintentionally, and like avoiding any biases that might be present in the LLMs themselves. So yeah, I kind of see those two streams pretty broadly there. Maybe we could jump into one or the other if you have any particular thoughts.
Yeah, I'm curious because I haven't talked to anybody really about this, but I am curious about your thoughts on AI. Is it plagiarism? Is it plagiarism that has been trained on other people's writing for the entire thing is based on other people's writing? Is that okay?
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, I want to like, part of me is like, yeah, the data's there, it's free, we should, or it's not free, but it's available, these things should be trained on it, like this is great for humanity, and then whatever. But then the other side is like, well, intellectual property is a real thing, and as a content creator and as like an artist and stuff, I understand how important that is, and it's literally people's livelihood. So I don't really know. And I know there's like a bunch of court cases going on now, like Sarah Silverman and George R. R. Martin and some other like big celebrities have come together and are suing OpenAI, I believe. Um, so I think that's something to be kind of decided in court. I don't know if it's plagiarism, but it's a really complicated question, because now we're not only talking about like the copyright for the work itself, but a copyright of the model that produced it, and there's all these sorts of questions. What do you think, Peter?
I'm a little torn to be 100% honest with you because I mean, it is hard to say how much different that is than say a human. Like, we read a bunch of content and inadvertently you do, you steal some of that when you write. Steal's not the right word, but that leaks into how you work. There's just no way you can't be influenced by something that you read. So is that different? I mean, my gut says that something's wrong, something's off on it. Like it seems off, but I don't, I can't put my finger on exactly why I feel that way because it's
Right.
not, it's not directly stealing something. It's not directly copying someone's work. So it's hard to know, if you obviously it's not a person, but if you look at it as an entity that's learned off these things, it's hard to say if that's necessarily wrong or not. I'm torn. I'm open to be influenced if someone's got a super strong opinion and I believe them, but at the moment I'm not sure. I think to me, the sad part about it is that I don't think in the end it's going to matter. I think it's going to push forward
Right.
regardless, and I think this is going to be a tool that we all use no matter what. So I think regardless of whether I think it's right or not, I'm going to have to use it, and we're all going to have to use it. I don't know if there's a way
Yeah,
around that.
I definitely agree. It's sort of a Pandora's box situation or whatever. Like you really can't go back at this point. So it just kind of is what it is. And yeah, that's something for legislation and courts to decide if it's ethical to, uh, you know, or if it's legal rather to just like take information and train your LLM with it and then make outputs. Like I really don't know. I think that's something that needs to be decided in a courtroom. And ultimately, I think I mean, like we certainly want to protect creators' property rights to some degree, but also like as you said, I think the benefits of it outweigh the actual downsides ultimately of what these things can do. So, but I mean, maybe that's a question of how these things are trained in the future. Like this might be a really serious question of like if you want to license your content to be trained in an LLM or something. If we reach that kind of a legal situation.
Yeah, we need some big technological breakthroughs to be able to enforce that in any way, shape, or form, unless you're going to not put your work in any sort of public forum.
Right. Um,
So yeah, I mean,
so yeah, I don't think either of us can really uh, figure that one out yet. But what do you think about the other side of it, of like from content creation? Just like what are like what ethics do you apply to yourself in trying to use this thing to create content?
for myself, I personally, and this is more, I don't know if this is an ethical reason or a pride reason, but I want it to sound like me anyway. So I try to hammer on the LLM as much as I can to get it to sound somewhat like my voice. I try to give it samples and I give it, so as much as I can context wise to be able to have it write kind of the way I want it to write, because I think if you're able to use it like a tool and you're able to create something that is similar to something that you would have written anyway, then I think it's okay to use.
Yeah,
But I know them being kind of a hypocrite because I thought the whole thing was immoral or whatever. But that's how I look at it. If I can use this as a tool to create something that's similar to what I would have created anyway, then I feel like okay about it. What about you?
right. Yeah, I agree with that, and I tend to do the same thing. I always feed it a lot of things that I've written previously, so that it kind of captures my voice and or tries to anyway. Um, and yeah, that I mean, in terms of plagiarism or something like that, I've never felt like I was like ripping someone off or something by using these tools or in any way. It kind of like you said before, like it's a very natural process to read a bunch of articles as a writer, and that's an interesting argument if like doing that and then and I think it's the same thing with whatever you do, like art, like music. You cover a bunch of songs before you write your own songs, or comedy. I'm sure there's you whatever. I don't really steal people's jokes. I guess you probably do all the time actually, but that's another topic entirely. Um, so there's yeah, I don't know. I don't really think too much about the plagiarism side of it, other than like just making sure that it hasn't really like plagiarized something directly. And usually it doesn't. Usually like it paraphrases things to the point where you couldn't really tell. A couple times I've had it return things that were very similar in structured articles that already existed. In that case, I was kind of like, but it's usually good enough at recombining things that like it doesn't feel plagiarized, and that's like a bigger philosophical question, I guess. So for me, I think like the main ethical things that I'm concerned with is mostly just the accuracy of like we want to make sure that the content we're creating is useful and helpful. So you need all of that infrastructure in place to make sure that whatever it's giving you is accurate. And then weeding out any like biases or misrepresentations. I think it's important to remember that these things are trained on human created content, which has human biases regarding all sorts of things, whatever controversial topic you can think about. So like all of that can be embedded, and it's not something that comes up too often in like technical content and stuff, but it is there and it's something to watch out for, just like the way that it says things and making sure that aligns with your messaging and just your personal ethics and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I guess the takeaway for that is read what it writes and rewrite it if you got it. Don't just take it at its face value. But
Yeah, absolutely.
it's pretty clear that both of us are still reasonably murky on the ethical impact of this, and I feel like that's probably reflected in a lot of the audience. I don't know if anyone's got this sorted out yet.
Yeah, I don't think we have it sorted out on a societal level.
No, I'll get on that. I'll see if I can fix that for us.
Please do. Yeah,
So that
tomorrow
brings us
would
to
be
the
good.
end of our yeah, I'll get it on tomorrow. By the end of the week, you'll have it done. That brings us to the end of our prepared questions. So at this point, we're going to take some questions from the audience. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will get to as many as we can here. The first question that is brought up to us, I will pose this to you, Roger. What can I do? Not myself personally, but I do. I actually, yeah, I'm going to ask this for my own personal, because I know you've been using this a lot. What can I do to become better at using AI for content generation?
Uh, what can you do personally? Well, I think the main thing probably, and we kind of already touched on this, is going in very small chunks every time. Right. So like you said, like almost on the level of sentence to sentence. If you ask it to go and write an entire article for you, it will do it, but it won't be very good. Um, but if you ask it paragraph by paragraph or line by line, you can get much better results.
Yeah, that's fair. I'd buy into that. Yeah, and I think don't be. Sorry, I'm really stumbling over that word. One of the things from my perspective that really helps is to not be afraid to reprompt it for the same thing over and over again until you get what you want. Like you don't have to accept what's there. You play around
Yeah.
with prompts as much as you can.
Yeah, keep playing with the prompts, and you can keep feeding its output back into it. So I mean, it has a decent, depending on what you're working with, like ChatGPT usually has a decent memory to like reference back, but I also find it useful to just like paste its own output back to it sometimes and say this and that. And um, just kind of understanding the prompts and different ways to feed it information. Something I do a lot is I'll give it a prompt full of information and I'll say, just reply okay to this and save this information for later, or something like that. And that just saves time, because if you give it a bunch of information and it'll start spitting out a bunch of crap that you don't want, but you're just like, no, save this for later, and then come back with prompts and teach it that way.
That's smart. I actually didn't. I didn't think of just telling it to say okay, because I sit there and either interrupt it in the middle of its whatever rambling or wait for it to finish when I just feed it information.
Yeah.
So I didn't think of that. That's actually really handy.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there, but yeah, like just keep playing with the prompts would be my biggest advice. Just don't be afraid to, tell it what you want and what you don't want as well, and just keep playing around until you get consistent outputs. And you'll develop strategies over time that give you consistent outputs.
Yeah. Examples is the other one. You mentioned that earlier. Give it examples of what you want. Give it examples of the tone and the style and everything that you want. And it's very good at following that. But if you don't give it to it, it's going to write it in its own voice and it's going to sound kind of clunky. So yeah, I mean, this is a cop-out answer, but it's the same as anything. Practice and use it a lot and really get in there and get your hands dirty is the only way to get better at it.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll move on to question number 2. I feel like we got as much as we can out of that at the moment. The little tips. Feel free again, if you have more questions like that about that specific question, feel free to email us at ContentLab. Go to our website, check it out, and send us an email. We're happy to talk about this all day. So second audience question. Let's go to this. Do content publishing companies still have a future in this era of AI? Do you think people are still going to be reading blog posts? So I guess that's a shot at a question for our own jobs on the line. Do we think this is still going to exist, or is AI going to take it all over?
Yeah, that ties into a lot of what we've said so far. Like, kind of to reiterate a couple of things. I mean, that's a great question, because it totally is going to change the way that we interact with and consume content. So like, I know personally, like there are certain things that I would now go and just ask ChatGPT about, and those tend to be like less personal and professional things. Like, I don't know, I asked it how to like cook asparagus the other day, and stuff like that. So like, but normally that would have been a Google search that would have taken me to some cooking blog or like marthastewart.com or something. But so in that sense, like it changes it from the publishing side. But like point I was making earlier is like, if you look at, just imagine that there's sort of a latency between something happening in the real world and creating content about it. The AI is going to add latency to that. And also the AI needs content to understand that this thing happened in the first place. So like that might actually be a major aspect of publishing in the future, is you're actually publishing content for the benefit of AI, so that like the Google's AI powered search engine or whatever, their LLM is aware of your content or your product or whatever, and it can respond in its output. I think we're still a ways away from that, but I think that is the direction search engines and stuff are going. I think there's a long time, but it's going to change the way that we interact with content for sure. Not to the point of making publishing irrelevant, though.
No, that's fair. I think there's always going to be a place, especially I think it's going to be less content, like you said, for really straightforward step-by-step tasks like cooking asparagus. You're not going to be able to write that blog anymore. But I think there's still going to be a ton of space for kind of thought leadership pieces and pieces about the industry and more soft skill kind of thing. I don't think AI is very good at that. I don't think it's very good at predicting what's going to happen or talking about current trends or things like that. So I think there is still quite a bit of space for that, and I think there always will be, because I don't think, as we talked about, AI can't have an experience. It can't really talk about what's going on right this second. So I think there's always going to be room for that. I just think the skills that people are going to need are going to have to be a little different. I think people are going to have to be maybe a little bit more insightful on their own. I think they're maybe going to have to be a little more You have to make the writing itself a little bit more interesting. I think it's going to be harder, but I think there will always be a space for content generation publishing companies and things like that. But
Yeah, agreed.
I don't know
And
the future.
though there may now be a premium on human created content as well, it may become more of a desirable thing, because hopefully we'll still want to hear what each other have to say, and we're in an era where we're mostly hearing from AI.
Yeah, that's very true. It is going to be weird for the next little bit, but I do think that if people are really good at coming up with good content and good writing and good thoughts, that there will always be a space for it. All right. Our next question, somebody giving you a little props here, Roger. They love the quote that you brought up in the beginning of the session, how AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without AI. So on a grassroots level, what AI platforms do you recommend for content marketing? These people say they use Chat, Google, Bard, Jasper, etc. But are there others that you secretly love? And what features of these platforms do you like?
The only one that you listed there, or that you didn't list there, that I have played with pretty frequently is Phrase, and Phrase.io. That one does some pretty cool stuff in terms of outlining and research, and also like ranking. ClearScope does some interesting stuff in terms of ranking as well. I believe that's kind of AI, but less on the generative side, more on the sort of analysis side. But personally, like I do most of things in ChatGPT kind of just because it was the first one, and I've become, or like not the first one, but like the one that came to prominence very early, and I've hooked into their API and like written apps and have my own like little open AI playground thing with it. So that's the one that I use most, and that's just kind of, I've developed myself into that ecosystem already. Bard also, I've got excellent results out of that. I haven't used it quite as much, but the very, very comparable. What about you, Peter? Any interesting AI tools?
The only one that's not there that I keep, and I'll be honest, I keep trying to use it and I keep really wanting it to be better than it is, but I keep getting disappointed with it, is Bing's AI chatbot for searching. Have you used that at all?
Yeah. Yeah, I have. It's called like, it starts with a P or something. I don't know, but yeah, that one's interesting, and it does pretty good job. But I find that, and it kind of goes back to the question of how this will change search, or how we consume content. Like I think we're going to see a lot more things like that. But what that kind of does is, like, for me at least, it just saves me like maybe a minute or so on a Google search of like clicking on links and reading things, whereas it can just kind of do that for me and give me a little summary, which is usually pretty accurate. What trouble have you had with it?
It doesn't find enough sources or the right sources or what I'm looking for. I've had a bunch of times where I'll say, "Can you give me 5 examples of this?" And it'll be like, "I got two," and I'll be like, "Can you give me more?" And it'll be like, "No." And so I'll be like, "Okay, well, that's not. Now I got to do it
That's
myself
interesting.
anyway."
Too lazy robot. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
When it
um,
gets an answer, it's usually right, but I've had lots of times where it just flat up tells me no, which is not what I'm looking for out of my AI.
right. Um, yeah, personally as a developer, I like to, and maybe it is very much a developer thing, but I like to go directly to the sort of LLMs themselves rather than kind of use the things that people have built on top of them. Like something like Phrase is pretty cool, but mostly they're just using Chat GPT, and you can, if you know how to prompt it, you can get similar or better results or more tailored results. Um, so that, if you're, kind of tech savvy, that's what I would encourage most people to look into, like dive into the Chat GPT API or Bard, or I don't know, like Meta does some things with Llama that seem pretty interesting. I haven't pursued that personally, but there's a lot of interesting options out there.
For sure. I named Cohere as another one too. They've got a nice LLM that works pretty well as well. It's not as well known, but they do a good job. All right. We haven't given you too much extra on that, but yeah, I agree with you. Getting in right at the base level in the LLM, I think, is the best way to understand it, and the best way to understand the prompts and how to use them. And then when you do build something on top of it, you've got a good head start. All right, we got time for a couple more quick questions here. Uh, Here's one for you. How do search engines like Google view, sorry, that's the wrong emphasis on the wrong word. How do search engines like Google view AI generated content? Is there a risk of such content being penalized or viewed as less authentic? That's an interesting question. I don't know the technical answer to that. Maybe you do.
Yeah, I did CEO SEO for a long time. CEO, I did SEO for a long time. Um, Search engine optimization, and this was like back then. AI wasn't. I'm talking over like the last decade or so. before AI really came to prominence. And back then, Google had a policy against automatically generated content in general. They penalized it. They tried to look for it. Back then, it was different though. It was the thing then. I can't remember the term they used for it, but it was like shuffling or something like that, where you would just like take pieces of other articles and like cut them together. And so like it's very primitive sort of things like that. And Google was looking for that, but they were also just penalizing like automated generated content in a way. And that was just so that like the search engine wouldn't be full of like Facebook feeds or something that's just like automatically being generated. Right. So, so traditionally, if you're looking at this from the old school sort of SEO perspective, you would be like, oh no, automated generated content is bad. But I know Google has changed their official stance on this now. To they now reward high quality content, however it's produced. I believe that's like their official line. The only thing that they're penalizing or looking for is attempts to use automation to game the search engine to like break their algorithm or somehow cheat, basically. So I think you're perfectly safe to use AI to generate content that can still rank well on the search engine, obviously with all the caveats of everything we've said in this conversation already. But you don't have to worry about Google just saying, oh, this is AI and knocking you down for it. And that's another interesting point, is that there aren't actually reliable tools to do that. So if you write something well enough, yeah, Google isn't going to know whether it's AI or not most of the time. So
yeah, if it doesn't know, how is it going to be able to stop it? So, but I do think the second part of that question is, will more people be asking ChatGPT or other? Oh, sorry, no, that's the second question after that. Yeah, I don't think there's a risk of it being penalized at the moment. I really think, unless the detectors get a heck of a lot better, that's going to be a minute before that's an issue. So, I think the focus should just be, like you said, creating good content, however you can do it. So, oh, there's a follow-up to that here. Someone has a theory that eventually AI will tell on itself, meaning I have a hunch that search engines will be able to find the AI-generated content and penalize it or bring it down in search engine results. Thoughts on this? Yeah, I think eventually that's going to come up, but I think we'll have lots of notice before that's a thing. I think we're still a minute away. I mean, it's just text, so it's really hard to tell if it's AI generated or if someone just writes like a robot. So I don't think it's around the corner, but
yeah, at the moment, like I know OpenAI came out and admitted that their own AI detector doesn't work effectively. It's not reliable. So, and I think that's the case across the industry in general. Like maybe Google has some kind of secret sauce, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do, because they have access to more data than pretty much anyone. So it's possible that they are building something that will be able to reliably detect AI. But I think like in the way that they've adjusted their official policy of just rewarding high quality content, like if you're making bad, spammy, low quality, low effort things, those are going to be penalized either way, is the goal. So I mean, if everything works as intended over at Google, I think high quality AI content shouldn't be a problem. But if you're just trying to blast stuff out onto the search engine, then that is going to be an issue, as it has been historically throughout the SEO thing.
yeah, as we talked about, if you use it as a tool and you use it to make good content, then I don't think it's going to be an issue. All right, we've got time for one last question. I know I said the last one was the last one, but this is the last one for real. This is our last question that we're going to talk about today. Do you think AI will change how people interact with content? Will we see more people asking ChatGPT or other AI for answers instead of searching for content?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on that a little bit before, just in regards, it's certainly going to change the way we interact with search and stuff. But at the moment, I wouldn't trust the outputs from LLMs enough to not look for their sources.
Yeah, I think that'll change a bit when LLMs get to the point that they can actually reference sources directly and you can look them up a little bit.
Which is interesting if you see what Alex just dropped in the chat. Also, OpenAI just announced in their Twitter feed, ChatGPT can now browse the internet to provide you with current and authoritative information, complete with direct links to source. It is no longer limited to data before September 2021.
Okay.
I did see that this morning. It's very interesting. I haven't really played with it to understand the implications of that, but very excited about that actually. And could probably have reopen the entire ethical debate we had before about the implications of that, but I'm excited. What do you think about that, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who uses it, that's going to be great for the use of it. But yeah, I mean, if they do have that and that does work as well as you think, then that's really going to put a hit on Google searches, I would imagine. If you're able to actually see where this information came from and verify it, then I don't know, that would cut my Google searching at least in half, I would guess.
Right.
But
yeah. And yeah, and it'll certainly remove some of the burden of just research and things. Like, it'll be really nice if ChatGPT gives accurate sources. Like, that'll be super nice, because sometimes it just makes stuff up. You'll ask it for a source and it'll tell you to go read some book that doesn't exist or something like that. So I hope that things like that will be reduced by it actually having access to the internet.
yeah, and in that case, program it to just say no. I don't have a source. Stop giving me fake websites and fake books that don't exist by authors that don't exist, or an author that does exist who never wrote that book. It's wild.
Even worse.
All right, well, that's all we have time for on questions. We really thank you, Roger, and thank you everybody for being here today. This was really fun. Hopefully, it was informative for you guys. We're going to be doing a series of these through the fall. So October 12th will be our next one. We're going to be talking about crafting developer content that converts at every stage. So that'll help you kind of understand how to make content that moves people along the funnel and really helps every step of the way along your business. On the 26th, we're going to be talking about understanding developer audience personas. As we all know, there's so many different kinds of developers and so many different roles. It's hard to necessarily nail down the personas that you want your content to reach. So we're going to talk about that. And then on November 9th, we're going to talk about content calendars for tech, balancing trends with evergreen insights. So how to kind of make sure your content hits all the newest things, but also you have lots of content that's going to live on forever and always be informative. So we're looking forward to all those. We're going to send out a copy of this Fireside Chat to everybody here, everybody on the list, and we're going to be posting it on our website. So if you know anybody who would benefit from taking this in, the video will be available. And I think that's about it. So thank you very, very much for being here. We appreciate it. All of us at ContentLab are really happy to put this on. And if you have any questions about this, feel free to contact us at any time. We'd love to talk more. So so for myself and Roger, thanks everybody, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Have a great day.